Well, we got to this moment because California has a sanctuary policy. The state law forbids local law enforcement from cooperating with, or local government from cooperating with immigration enforcement. We've all agreed on what immigration laws are.
Well, there's not a state We're going to talk about this more in the hour.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America. Welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. Unless you've been living under a pile of rocks, you know exactly what we're going to be discussing in this video, and that's the continuous situation going on out of LA, where we've been seeing these anti-ICE, pro-illegal immigration protests and riots just about on a daily basis now. The reason why I want to talk about it is not to give you any sort of partisan spin, but I want to point out what the partisan spin is, because this is the latest example of a split partisan narrative coming out of a very tense and downright dangerous situation. On the left, you're hearing about these poor illegal immigrants becoming the victims of an aggressive Trump administration who has sent in the National Guard against the wishes of Governor Gavin Newsom in order to facilitate the apprehension and subsequent deportation of illegal immigrants. It's what the president ran on, and he's fulfilling that promise. Now, if you're on the right, you're hearing about the protests and the violence that is stymieing and stopping the Trump administration from doing its job in rounding up and deporting these illegal immigrants. Two different focuses here, the same situation. Somewhere in the middle is the truth, but what happens when you're in the middle of analyzing the situation and the truth comes out almost accidentally? Well, if you're CNN, you stifle it. You throttle it. You stop it from getting any traction. And that's the situation we're dealing with here with this CNN anchor. And we're going to be talking about a panel that happened on CNN yesterday morning. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you're seeing here in this or any other video on the channel, smash that thumbs up button. But don't cause any violence or anything like that while you're doing it. Then you're going to like, share, subscribe, and do all that good stuff so you can help this channel grow thanks to the YouTube algorithm.
What?
Feed me!
Okay.
As always, gang, thank you so much for all that you do to help grow the channel. You know I appreciate all of those efforts. And if you happen to be a newbie finding the channel for the first time, maybe you heard about us reaching 3,000 subscribers, I hope that this video earns your subscription as we talk about this CNN anchor. Her name is Audie Cornish. She kind of flies under the radar to me because, let's face it, I don't watch CNN that often. I get whatever clips I can. I haven't really come across her, but this clip definitely piqued my interest because this shows how the media chooses narratives, how they pump up one and stifle the other.
Joining me now in the group chat, CNN politics senior reporter Stephen Collinson, Republican strategist and CNN political commentator Brad Todd, and CNN contributor Lulu Garcia-Navarro.
So as you can see right from the start here, this is your typical CNN panel with two left-leaning panelists, one right-leaning panelist, that being Brad Todd, who you see on the screen. And the discussion is going to turn into the increase in political rhetoric between Gavin Newsom and the Trump administration. So let's get into it and see what their thoughts are here.
I was talking during the break about whether or not this is still an immigration story, sort of how we're thinking about this moment. Can I kind of open it to you guys?
This is a very perilous moment because what we're seeing here is a fight that President Trump wants to have.
Meaning with blue states.
With blue states,
yeah.
About immigration, about the rule of law and the way that he views it, and also using the threat of military force in a way that we haven't seen in this country, federal military force. I mean, there's discussion of deploying Marines for what is a civil disturbance. This should be of concern, I think, to many, many people in this country. And so I think the context is that, yes, this is about immigration enforcement. Los Angeles is a city where 50% almost are Latinos. The people who have been protesting, peacefully protesting, I'm not talking about the violent protesters here. Violence should never be something that's condoned. But the people who have been peacefully protesting, sometimes they're first, second generation Latinos who are worried about this kind of immigration enforcement. Yeah. And so, you know, this is a complicated issue.
And something we heard earlier,
It's a complicated issue as we see a city burning to the ground thanks to violent protesters. Now, I'm glad that Lulu Garcia Navarro acknowledged that there's a difference between peaceful protesting and violent protesters. No more of that mostly peaceful nonsense, at least from her. And let's give credit where it's due. Now, she framed the issue in two different ways. One being the Trump administration basically picking a fight over the supremacy of law when it comes to immigration enforcement. Now, the Constitution, as we know, vests the power of immigration enforcement and regulation with the president. There's an exclusive control there. So when the sanctuary laws that we've been talking about for years developed in contravention of the federal power that vests in the president, the states are making an argument saying, well, wait a minute, you can control immigration policy, but you don't have to draft us into working for you to deport what would be otherwise peaceful citizens within the jurisdiction. Now, I don't use citizens in the legal distinction, but peaceful people who are residing in a given sanctuary jurisdiction. Brad Todd is going to take it from here on that first point, and I think he pretty much nails it.
I think in a piece of tape was a protester saying every moment that we're out here, they're not, he said, in our communities doing raids, et cetera. Brad, what are you thinking?
Well, we got to this moment because California has a sanctuary policy. The state law forbids local law enforcement from cooperating with, or local government from cooperating with immigration enforcement. We have immigration laws that govern the entire land, and California is willfully ignoring them. California's left-wing politicians set this up. Nailed it! If California had long been cooperating and helping enforce immigration laws all along the way, this would not be.
It's not the whole state. You do know that some of this is jurisdictions. There are certain towns that do. Yeah, but there are certain towns that absolutely have cooperated with federal authorities.
Shouldn't they all?
And boom goes the dynamite.
Bradford is arguing that but for California adopting these sanctuary laws statewide and in these local municipalities like Los Angeles, there wouldn't be these perilous times and these images that you're seeing right now, and that California basically picked this fight. It's a different stance from what we heard from Lulu Garcia Navarro saying that Trump picked this fight. Where do you feel it lies here? Who started this? Get into the comments and let's talk about it. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show.
You know, this is part of the issue that is always interesting here is when Republicans want to talk about states' rights, it's about states' rights when it is something that they're interested in and not when it is something that perhaps Democrats and their states are interested in. And so I think...
But we've all agreed on what immigration laws are.
Well,
There's not a state...
Now, just when Brad Todd is about to make his point of what we've been saying earlier here in the video, and that is that the federal government and indeed the president has exclusive jurisdiction over regulating immigration and naturalization, this is where the CNN host Audie Cornish steps in to stifle the discussion.
We are going to talk about this more in the hour. I want to bring in Stephen because there is something you mentioned earlier about militarization. We're going to come back to your point.
Now, from the clip that I saw on YouTube, she doesn't get back to this point. Now, I don't know if it happened later on in the show, and if somebody can show me the entire clip, I would love to see it. Or if this is Audie Cornish trying to move the discussion along and not get into the minutiae of things. But what's undeniable here is that what she did is stop the lone Republican on the panel, the lone right-leaning person on the panel, from driving the point home about the law. Which begs the question, does CNN not want people to know about the difference between federal exclusive jurisdiction over an area of law versus the federal split between federal government and state government on certain other aspects? Because what Lulu Garcia Navarro was trying to talk about there was saying, well, Republicans like states' rights when it's about an issue they want to talk about, like policing, for example. But when it comes to an issue like this, they're all about federal control. Well, that's not true necessarily here, because the Constitution settles the matter of who controls immigration and naturalization. And the answer is, it's not the states. This is why Republicans should have been arguing all this time that all of these sanctuary laws are unconstitutional because they usurp power from the federal government as granted within the Constitution by the states. Remember, the Constitution just delineates what powers have been delegated to the federal government by the states, and every other power is reserved to the states themselves. The states determined that immigration and nationalization, that's a national concern. That's not a state-by-state concern, because you can have these inconsistent laws and no one will know what kind of legal footing they're on, depending upon what state they're in. It's not fair to law enforcement, and it's not fair to the immigrant that is coming in. Illegal immigrants think they can come in and go to these sanctuary states and never be bothered. This new aggressive action by the Trump administration is the shock to the system of all these illegal immigrants, because they thought they had cover. And it turns out they don't have cover. Now, whether or not the federal government can use national military forces like the Marines that were discussed here in the clip earlier, or whether or not the president can take control of the National Guard, that's messy legal stuff that we can certainly talk about another day. And certainly I'm going to talk about it later in the week with my pal Ross Galloway, who is a former National Guardsman, and he'll be able to shed some light on that issue. So tune in Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time for Behind Enemy Lines on that point. But I find it very interesting that Audie Cornish chose that moment to stop that discussion, to move on to something else. To me, it's almost as if she got some sort of message in her earpiece, and I'm speculating here. I have no basis whatsoever for this. This is just rank speculation on my part. That she got a message in her ear saying, move on, and let's talk about the other issue, which is the militarization of ICE and the use of the National Guard, and Newsom's pending lawsuit, which I believe he has filed, trying to stop the federal government from using National Guard resources that normally the governor would be in control of. That's also a credible news story, but the timing just really sticks in my craw. You know, I'd love to say that it was mere coincidence, but I've learned in politics over the, God, how long has it been? Almost 2 decades worth of observation, that there rarely is such a thing as a coincidence in politics. Things are motivated with intention. I think this was a situation where CNN decided to cut off, which would have been a worthwhile discussion about federalism, and move on to a topic that would be seen as more favorable to their left-leaning audience. I talk about this sort of hackery, and I'm reaching for it now, in my book, Schnooks, Crooks, Liars, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available right now on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores.
This guy is a grifter!
You didn't think you'd get away without a grift here, did you? That's what I do, people. But anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, the hack journalists like Audie Cornish, like others at CNN and MSDNC, and indeed at Fox News, they play to their audience. They tell their audience what they think the audience wants to hear. In this case, they wanted to hear more about Trump overstepping his authority and getting in trouble, and how this is unjust and illegal, rather than an honest discussion of the division of federal powers and how Trump most likely, and I'm not foreclosing any other conclusion here, but most likely there's a rebuttable presumption that Trump is indeed within his authority under the Constitution to do what he's doing. Is it heavy-handed and aggressive? Certainly. But it's probably legal, at least up to the point where the National Guard has been deployed under his authority. That may be something we get caught up in later. And again, we'll talk about that with Ross Galloway on Wednesday night. That being said, I'm trying to understand why journalists like Cornish and others think that their audience can't take the counterpoint. They should be able to understand every point of view of a multifaceted issue like this one that's been going on for days, that's been dominating the news cycle. And instead, what they do is they dumb it down to their audience and they feed them the narrative of their own choice. This is why hacks can't be relied upon when it comes to seeking out that truth. And it perpetuates this partisan divide that is going on right now in this latest example in Los Angeles. It's going to keep dividing us over and over until it gets to a breaking point in our country. And that's the point I kind of dread here. I don't think we're there yet with this story in Los Angeles, but the growing tensions and the increased violence shows that we're headed in that direction. And it's hacks like Cornish here that are pushing it that way. Now, I may be being a little harsh toward Audie Cornish here. What do you think? Do you think that Audie Cornish and or CNN intentionally stopped that discussion because it was showing too favorably to conservatives and Republicans and too much to the Trump side? Or do you think that this was just a balance of time issue trying to get through a lot of topics in a short amount of time? Let's get into the comments together. And as always, like and share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the shows. Thank you again for getting us to 3,000 subscribers. Let's keep on going. Hell, can we make it to 4,000 by the end of the year? Only you guys can decide that. But let's get into the comments together and discuss this video, as well as all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.